I'll be sharing my screen. There we go. So yeah, we'll talk about logging together today. I'm glad to see that there's many of us gathered for the meeting today. Some that I'm familiar with and get to see somewhat often on the meetups that we have left and right in the community. So this will be really one angle on how someone can possibly implement logging in their own system. And it is not about audit logs, right? Saying how is the data changed or things like that. It's really more about um, error logging and other types of events that we want to write to a log. So we'll look at, what are the components. We'll have a demo file that we'll try to pop up the hood and see how things are wired. And at any time, if you feel like having a question or comment, just interrupt and we can discuss right there and then. So so yeah, here we go. How do we do this? About leaving traces without getting dirty. So basically, trying to establish if we want to log information in our app or not. I think most of the time people default to not doing it because there's a decent amount of scaffolding to put together if you want to be logging information in your app. But maybe with this in hand, it could make it easier. And then once you have that as part of your toolkit, you could say, okay, well, now that I know it's something I might do more easily, then how, what does the implementation look like? So, and in the process, there's some decisions to be looking into and things like that. So, one of the decisions that come into play is, well, what are we going to write in there, right? So, the obvious answers is writing errors, of course, but there's also other things that we might want to put in. So it could be how long does it take to do something. It could be to say, hey, we've reached this milestone or we've done this thing. An invoice was printed. Again, and we want to know every time that an invoice gets printed, we need to write it somewhere. So maybe we want to have that. Or sometimes it's not necessarily about how long it took, but it could be to say, hey, let me know, this thing that I have set to run server side that will process any outstanding, you know, item that I have in my queue. Uh, I'd like to know this time around how many outstanding items it attempted to process to start with, because if I'm trying to process 70 of them, or if I'm trying to process 7,000 of them, it may not be the same deal. So maybe it would flag me in one way or another, or to explain how long it took to run, or just to say, hey, I'm really not supposed to have 7,000 of those things at any point in time in the system. So something else that we need to take into consideration, especially if we want our logging code to be part of the code of our application and to stay in there all the time, not something that we write in and then we do debugging and then we remove from our code, is to say, well, what's the level for each of the entries that we're thinking of, right? So we have different kinds of things that are more critical, like errors, would more likely need to be logged every single time anything happens. And then there are things where we could say, well, maybe I don't need that all the time, especially when we're closer to the other end of the scale, where we're talking about entries that are more of the debug and trace type of thing. So There's also obviously things that we should attempt and make sure they never hit the logs, like passwords or anything sensitive, really, because even if we say, hey, that's part of my FileMaker database, and I'm able to secure it, or I need to have access to the server if we are writing to disk or something like that. Basically, a log is still a treasure trove of information, and if it falls in the wrong hands, um, bad stuff is likely going to happen. Um, so yeah, kind of now that we know what we might want to log, why would we want to do that? Well, first is to know what happened, right? Sometimes we're looking at a script and we are having some assumptions. We are inferring from what we see, what may happen, what might explain that the script failed in a way that we didn't quite expect, or what might explain that it's taking this much time, and so on and so on. When you're logging, you're able to put all of those assumptions to the test and see if they're valid or if they're just assumptions and they're not founded, right? So so yeah, that's really the log is the one way to know what happened and when it happened and all of those things. And because now you know what happened, then it's easier to interpret the results that you're experiencing. Like we said, if you're saying, hey, why is this taking so long? Well, if you have the data, it's going to be easier to say, oh, it's taking this long because there's definitely records to process or because of something else. So the other thing that can be nice is to centralize all of your log data, right? Because FileMaker does have an option to let you log information to the workstation, and it's gonna write in a file, right? Um, but as a developer, for you to get access to the information that's on a file that sits on a user's workstation is not necessarily something all that easy. So, when you centralize, then um, you have all the information in one place. You can even see if there are multiple users doing stuff at the same time. Well, maybe you're going to get log entries that will be intertwined in between what user A is doing and user B is doing, when you would expect that everything that from user A would happen um, so quickly that nothing gets to slip in between the two of them. So it gives you a vision of what's happening on this in the system, at the same time, instead of this kind of a sliver to say, well, I know this user did this, but I don't know what else was happening um, at the same time in the system. So yeah, and then you can attempt to see if you find patterns when things go wrong. So for instance, if FileMaker crashes or if the server just becomes unresponsive, you can go back to your log and say, oh, what are the couple last things I had in there before it started stalling on me? And if if it looks like from one time to the next, you get to see the same entries, then you can say, hey, maybe we have something worth investigating further, right? So, and also your log can accept entries from different files. So you could have different databases on your server, and say, okay, well, all the entries will be logged into um, the same log table. So of course, at that point, if you want to be able to distinguish what is coming from what system, you'd have to make sure that all that information um, is carried along, for the ride. When you're saying, okay, I need to create a log entry, you'd have to make sure that you're sending the file name and the server name, perhaps, because all of that will be will be relevant. And also when thinking of a log table that sits in your FileMaker file, if you then move that file to a different server, well, you don't want to be looking back at the log thinking that all those things happened while the file was hosted on this new server. You want to have the right context. So all of those things are things that you need to think about. Now, once you have data like that, the likeliness is that it will pile up faster than than what you may be thinking. So you'll have to pretty quickly get into, okay, how are we going to look at it? How are we going to run queries against it, or try to narrow down the set of data that we're looking at? So usually it's can be, you know, just the order that things happened in, or just to say, I want to narrow on everything that Sebastian is doing, or if it's something that involves just this one script, you know, to say, hey, is it hitting the log ever? Maybe it's not hitting the log. It hasn't been seen in the logs for, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months, a year. We can get rid of that thing. Or the other way around, you know, to know that this script is really involved into things that we're doing day in, day out. And if we can get some gains there, then it will make a big difference on the system. And again, to say, okay, well, in the end, there are things where maybe I'm not going to be caring much about things that are in info when I'm trying to debug some things, but I'll be saying, okay, list me all of the errors, right? So those are the type of things that that you're likely going to have, and the list goes on, right? It's not attempting to say, okay, that's it, end of story. So it really depends on how you're going to use this. Also, like, it's nice for us to have a data store readily available as part of the product. You know, we say, hey, I want to log information. Where might I put that? Well, the FileMaker table is a perfect fit, and it is very nice. But you can also see that your entries get elsewhere. So you could attempt to write to a file on disk, or you can say, I'm going to do an API call to send that information over to something else. So yeah, and basically we're not talking about data synchronization here. We're really just talking about, okay, some things that happened. So it's not like it needs to be a live replication thing up to the second, right? You could say, okay, I've written all of this, and then at a point in time where you feel comfortable, you can say, okay, well, all of this I need to push it off to this other data storage type thing, a little bit like backups, you know. So so that's really all up to you. So among the decisions that we are dealing with, there are things to say, well, okay, when is it that we're supposed to get notified? Because it's one thing to have a log, you know, but if we have a log for something that is critical and it gets written to the log, but nothing more, then you've kind of missed an opportunity. Usually you want to be getting some type of message, either email or SMS or whatever, you know, a Slack message that will be catching your attention, and that, you know, hey, something's going wrong. You should look at it. Okay. Also, as we said, you're going to be gathering a decent amount of data in there. So it's the data, like having logs for, say, the past 2 weeks is good. Are you likely to be, you know, scrubbing 2 log entries that are a month old, 3 months old, and so on? So again, when to back up, when to get rid of log entries is something that you'll be coming across. And also, it's one thing to have the tool set in place, but if you don't change your code to say, hey, when there's an error, go write it to the log, or when this happens, go write it to the log, your log will remain empty, right? So you need to take action and say, okay, where is it in my code base? It makes sense for me to start tracking things down. So here I'm suggesting using a dedicated file to write to the log, just because you know it's something you write often to, and if you have other components in your stack of databases that is more static, right? Then in terms of your backup policy, FileMaker will will always see this as new stuff, right? So maybe you want to to have that in a dedicated file to say, okay, if this changes, we can take a backup of it, or but not necessarily as frequently, or things like that. So all of that is up to you, but having a dedicated file will give you the opportunity for this to follow a different backup schedule than the rest of your system. And also, if you have a dedicated file, it lets you reuse that for multiple files instead of saying, oh, turns out, we've rolled out logging first into our invoicing system, and now we have this other, maybe um, I don't know, inventory system or sales system or something that has maybe not even anything to do with invoicing. But just because it needs to log stuff out, you'll need to grant that thing access to your invoicing file. So if you have a dedicated file, you can be sure that yes, you're granting access to the log file, but not to any other component of your system at the same time. So also, yeah, so a log is really meant to be used to write things down, not so much to modify an existing entry and to delete existing entries. So there are things that you can do to say, I want to prevent even a full access account to be doing modifications or deletions to the records. And like we said earlier, logs are really a treasure trove of information. So if you have a security breach that involves your log, you're in a bad place, right? So try and secure everything that way, and avoid, obviously, um, putting in there things that are sensitive. Passwords is an obvious things, but sometimes some things that we can consider um, not all that um, sensitive, or that would just make the log entries less relevant, like account names or script names, or what are the parameters that are expected in there, right? To us, when debugging, we need that information to know, okay, what does the log entry tie into? But if someone was to be able to retrieve a full list of all the account names in the system just by accessing the logs, we may not want them to go there, or to know, some scripts that could be used, and maybe they'll be able to tap into open URL and call on that script with the right set of parameters. So yeah, things to watch for. The log is good in itself, but if it falls into some bad hands, you'll be in a bad place. So ingredients. All right. So well, like we said, a dedicated file. Okay. So, and that file will need a script to create a log entry. Okay. We also need log level for our session, okay, to say, are we going to be logging at what level, right? So just the errors or warnings and errors, so warnings or info, or everything. I want trace, I want debug stuff too, so that's something usually you initialize at startup, but you could quite literally have that change throughout the course of your session, or you could say, okay, when Robert logs in, he's going to be defaulting to debug mode, or something like that, and when someone else logs in, we're just going to track everything that is info, warnings, and errors. Okay, so that's really up to you according to your opening procedure in the file. And on top of that, well, we need a custom function that lets us convert the text value of our level into a numerical value, because the level is just that. We're going to make some math comparison to say, okay, am I higher or lower than the target level? And basically, we need a number value for each of those to be able to make that comparison. And and then we're going to need something to let us know, okay, I have this thing that I know I want to write it to log. I know what level I need to log. So we're going to need some type of test to say, okay, well, we have an incoming payload that says it's a level of info. Are we supposed to log it out, or are we supposed to just disregard that payloads of that level? Yes or no, right? So we have a custom function that will compare the level required with the level of the session. Um, and yeah, trying to establish when is it that we need to log information out, especially if your errors are bubbling up to your parent scripts in your script stack, right? You won't want to have the error be logged out at every level of your script stack. So making a comparison in between the script name for where the error is from and the script name of the running script is a good thing. You could also just say, okay, well, we're going to have an error that has this syntax, right? And when we are done writing to the log, then we just add a tag to that error payload to say, oh, it has been logged. So then anything that looks at it further down the road can just disregard having to log the information out. So yeah, it's just to let us know if we if the error was generated by the script that is running, and then a custom function that compares for info, debug and trace, the level required with the level of the session. So now that we're no longer dealing with errors, those they get logged every time, provided they match the correct error level. And lastly, we have a custom function that gives us a log payload to bonify or extend the existing JSON that we have to say, well, for any log entries, I want to have this in there. So it just merges the two together and then carries that on into your log. So yeah, that's that. So we're going to be looking at the details of all this in FileMaker. So we have this here. If anyone has questions or comments about what has been said, again, feel free to interrupt and perhaps some of what we'll look into is going to make all of that a bit clearer. So here we're having a set of files. Okay, there's like 4 files. One is meant to be like a UI file, and again another one for just the data or just scripting, and then one that handles especially just the logs. Okay, so in here I've made a list view, okay, that can give me any of my log entries. So I can go to what I have, say around here. It looks like I ended the session sometime yesterday, right? And if there is any information other than what is part of the list view that I need to see, I've put in the footer the details um, of what came in, right? So I have here a popover that will give me the full payload of what came in as a JSON. Okay, so if we want to look in here, we can say, okay, we had something. It says the context is, okay, what's the account name and privilege set? What was the client version, and a bunch of things. So again, what is stored in here is really up to you to determine what you want to see in here. So this is just some type of a boilerplate payload that you can use in your system if you feel like it, and the table is using this to say, okay, well, when the record gets created, we're going to parse out information like the message or the level or the error, okay, because this is something that we always need to have, right? So actually, the level is not part of the payload, but the rest is, So if we look at message, it's going to say, okay, we have an auto enter, and then it's going to say if it's an error, it expects the uh, the syntax to be leading with error, and if not, expects source. But then we say, okay, based on what we had in the JSON, then tell me what I have at the message address, either at error.message or at source.message, depending on the type of payload we're dealing with. So you can parse anything out of the JSON in that way. I think the error code would be somewhat similar, but in this case, error code is only available with errors, so you don't even bother checking for the other type of payload. So, and script name and file name. And again, like I said, if to you something else in the payload is relevant and deserves to be parsed out every time you create an entry, you can just make a new field and then say, okay, I'm going to parse this out. But you're not forced to parse everything out to display it. And that's one great way to use the layout calcs, right? So over here in my footer, we're seeing the user, we're seeing the script. In the case of this error here, I even have the line number and the object that I'm sorry, the script set that was involved. But all of that is really just a bunch of layout calcs, right? So I can click in here and say, okay, this is my calculation. Do I need anything else or not? And be done. So obviously you won't be able to do a search against something that is in here. So like I said, if to you making search against the username is something important, then go ahead, parse it out, and then you can put it as either in the detail portion of the view or even have it be part of the list display. That's entirely up to you. So that's for the just the structure of what we have in terms of the table itself. And if we take a second to go look at the data structure, tables, and so on. Well, that's what we have here. We just have the log table and one other table, and the fields we saw, relationships. There's next to nothing on here, right? Just the log and that's it. So now in terms of scripting, this file is the one file in charge of creating the log entries. So this file will have the scripting to create an entry, okay? And this is where I use this time in the presentation to say a large portion of what we're seeing today is directly inspired by what Dan Spit has published into this FileMaker Logger module. So there's a GitHub link here for anyone who wants to go see that. I believe his rendition dates back to something where Jason was not even part of the platform. So I've kind of reused bits and pieces, and there could be things that are not really part of what he made. But all in all, just wanted to put out the licensing information still. So so yeah, log entry create is where the bulk of the work happens, right? So we're getting a log level and log data, right? And then we're going to do things with that. And basically, once we're on our layout in our window to do that, we just say, okay, let's create a new record and write my log level and write my log data and commit. Okay, and that's it. We're done. So that's pretty easy. And again, here, if you are rolling this out into not a dedicated file, but part of your solution, I would recommend saying, okay, well, we want to do this in a new window because you'd want your log entry to be outside of any ongoing transactions that you have in your file. But apart from that, it keeps going, and then we say, okay, what kind of post-processing may we have for that log entry? So post-processing is really something where we talked a little bit about the notifications, right? So over here, you would test to say, okay, what was the payload like, and then do I need to notify anyone or something like that, and then we get out of there, right? So and then we have something where if on log entry or we fail to create the log entry itself, we have something in here that relies on something that I think was first published by Hansa, and it's something where basically he was looking for a way to write to the native FileMaker server log, and he realized that as you are using the relogin script step, if you provide something that that is not valid, right? The password will never hit the server logs, but it will the server log will say, oh, you had a failed relogin attempt for user account, and then whatever you have in here is going to be shown in the server logs. So he said, well, I'm just going to inject in here something that happens not to be an actual account name, but rather the data that I want to see in the server log. And so yeah, basically here we're simply saying, okay, if for whatever reason it looks like we were unable to create our log entry record, we're going to fall back on this rescue boat type of a thing and see if we can log that out and have on creation failure, again, something that would notify us to say, hey, we're trying to write to the log, but we're unable to do that. So if something happens, we're just blind. So you should really, really, really look into it. So that's really all the scripting that we have in here, and that gets us to look at what kind of scripting do we have in our existing solution. Like what would be the interface file, right? So any questions on the setup for the log entry?
It's Paul Davis. I have one here. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you indicate, well, for good reason, you don't necessarily want to keep the log in the application that you're logging for. Do you advocate uh, having the log on a like a text external file? And if so, wouldn't you want to encrypt that, an MBS type encryption?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Well, again,
or do you
mhm.
use a separate FileMaker database for the log?
So I'll use a separate FileMaker database for the log. Okay. Um, and still, if you want to write to disk and generate a file, you're free to do that. Just know where you're doing that, right? So I would be shy of writing to a file on a workstation. If it's writing to a file on the server, right? We already have the server creating log files as files in the the server, and those are not encrypted, because we consider the server environment to be the the most secure place of the whole infrastructure. So um, so yeah, you can go different ways about that, and you're not forced to just have it in one place. You can say, okay, I'll start by writing it into my table, but I'll also replicate it to disk some in some other way, right? If you say I need to write to a file and append to that file, you can do that. If you say I'll just send out an export every hour for the last hour of any log entries that I have in here. That's really up to you how you want to do this. Am I answering the question?
You are. There is a wrinkle here, and that is with FileMaker Cloud, dealing with external files isn't all that straightforward. I mean, you could write one to the temporary folder, and I guess you can pull it out and email it to yourself or uh,
Hmm.
or to the developer or wherever.
Yes.
But
So if you're in
it
a cloud
seems to me that
environment,
really the easier way to do it is with a separate FileMaker database and use APIs to write into it.
yes, yes. Basically, on a cloud environment, I would say don't try to write to disk and retrieve something from the disk. You're much better off saying, okay, here is information that I have. I'll have this API call that will send it off. And again, free to you to say, is it something that needs to happen as you are quote unquote writing to the log? Like, will you be having one API call for each of your log entries, or will you be keeping things in a FileMaker table and then
Yeah.
say, oh, I'm making a bundle for this many log entries that are from my last 10 minutes or whatever, and then every 10 minutes you just do a batch call that lets you interact with that API where you're sending maybe, I don't know, like 1,500 um, log entries at a time, or something like that.
That would be a lot more efficient. It would slow your, it would, it wouldn't slow your basic system down as much if you did it that way.
Yeah, you want to be conscious about how much of a strain something like this can put on your system, and it's also why, um, like I said, we have different logging levels, to say, okay, well, this is something I want to see hit the logs each and every time, and not log anything twice as say an error that would bubble up the call chain. Um, and and yeah, just trying to be conscious
Yeah.
of that. So if you say, okay, well, I'm going to have this one debug session where maybe it will generate more entries, but you're not in debug mode every single time, or not every single user is using that either. So it lets you control a little bit how much you get into your logs. Sounds
Okay.
good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, let's have a quick look at something we have here for our scripting. So I have three use cases. Okay. Um, and before we look at the scripting, I'll have a quick look at the custom functions. Okay. So going into here, custom functions. I'll just put that in alphabetized. All right. So we have two functions here. Error needs log entry and log needs log entry. Okay. And basically they're very close to each other. So I'll start with logs need log entry. Okay. And we're saying, okay, it gets a level as text. Okay. And it compares that level as text with our session level. Okay. And the session level at startup, I've said, okay, we're going to store that into a global field for the duration of the whole session. If it changes, I'll update the field accordingly. Okay. And then it just makes the comparison, right? So if the level um, I'm asking for is greater than my session level. Okay, so if I'm asking for something that's a trace level against a session level that just says, oh, just log info and more critical, right? Then it's going to say, well, I don't need to log this out. Okay, and the other way around, if it is equal or inferior to it, equal or less to it, it will then say, oh, I need to log that out. Okay. Um, so again, just having a quick view. So on first window open, we're just saying, okay, what is my log level going to be? So if debug is enabled, I say, okay, go fetch in some data store that I have in here, um, the log level that matches debug. If otherwise, fall back on my default log level. So, but that gets stored to the same field, and um, and we now have that available when we are asking for something to be logged, right? So then I could come over here and say, I have a script. I'm reaching a milestone. It's a milestone that I care about. I want to log information out on this. So it's going to be, it's not an error. It's some info, right? So I'm going to say my log level is info. And then I'm going to call in an if statement, do I need to log this? So log needs log entry, and then I send in the log level that I just set. Okay. So this will compare, the log level I'm asking with my session log level. And again, if we say, oh yeah, info is something that you need to log out, then it's going to go in here and do the logging mechanism, right? And if it's not something that we need to log out, then it skips over it. Okay. And it's the same type of thing for errors. If I do have something where along my scripting I pick up an error, well, as I exit of the rest of my process up above, I have this check, okay, that says, oh, do I have an error? If I do, then do I need to log it out? Okay, and to know if I need to log it out, we have both the comparison with the level, but we also send in the error information itself. Okay, so looking at that sibling custom function, So we said error, creation order, error, not creation order, I'm going to function name there. So error needs log entry, okay? So it's the same type of comparison, okay? But because we are getting the error, then we're also able to say, well, if the error is empty, then we're not going to log out anything, right? And then there's some other conditions that let us know, okay, well, is this an error that I should log out or remain silent about? Okay, so that's all it is for those two custom functions, and then we have, you know, log level as number. So that's just a conversion that says, okay, if we are given string trace, we output 5, debug, we output 4. So it just basically is an easy conversion. And then we have the log payload and the log data default. Okay, and log payload and log data default. Data default is something we're not going to see in the scripting. But log payload is something that we use to basically wrap everything we're sending out to our log. And it says, okay, we're expecting two things. We're expecting the level and the data, okay? So for instance, in the scripting that we were looking at earlier, right? I said, okay, I have a log message, okay? And then I'm saying, okay, what's my log payload? Well, my log payload is just that. It's calling log payload and it's saying, okay, give the message and the level, okay? And those two things together get wrapped, and then we send that as a parameter to the scripting that creates the log entry, okay? So if we look at the function, not the needs log entry. I need to stop having those in creation order. So yeah, log payload, it takes the level, and the level is really sent as is. But for the data, we're going to do some checks, right? So we're going to look, oh, are we getting something that is a JSON object? If so, it gets preserved. If we're not getting a JSON object, then we're defaulting to it being put under a mapping of a source message, and then that data gets sent as a JSON string, okay? And basically we have in here something where we take that data, okay, and we do a JSON merge. So we merge the data with the default data that we want to see hit the log for the given level that we're at, okay? So, and this, I think, is something where Tony may be sharing a custom function, I think, in the chat to say, oh, here are things that may be useful to track if you are error logging or anything like that. So so this one here is another rendition of such a custom function. So log data default, okay, it just expects the level, okay. So we're just grabbing anything we see fit, right? And you're free to come in here and to say, oh, you know what, to me, the window style doesn't matter, so I'm just gonna blank it out. Or if you want something more, you can add to it, just insert anything you see as being useful in here. But basically, it grabs a bunch of get functions and builds a matching JSON for it. And it builds it as it goes, saying, okay, well, for, you know, the for this level, it's going to be that much. But then if we are on the debug and trace level, then take whatever you've defined up above and add to it milliseconds, you know. And then if you're at trace level, then again, take everything that you had up above and add to it microseconds, or and again, here we're using milliseconds and microseconds as example, but it's just to say, depending on the log level that you're at, you can say, hey, you know what, for the rest of the time, I'm really not going to care so much about all of those things. Those will be just things that I pay attention to when I'm in debug mode, so you can shift things around, and it's as you see fit. So yeah, if we run this, right, we then get a scripting where basically we can say, okay, I want to track my my milestone. Sorry, just want to make sure that I hit the right keys on my keyboard. So yeah, as we go, okay, we started our script. The script doesn't really have a script parameter. We say, okay, this is going to be info. We've reached a milestone, and then for the info level, I happen to know that it clears the threshold for the information to be logged out. So we're going to say, okay, what's the message, and then what's the full payload. So again, just looking at the data viewer, right? Log message is just a string of text right now, and log level is just info, and my log payload is a JSON like this, right? So it bundled up with the default data that I said would be coming along for the ride every time. So the JSON is already built, and then we give that out to the script that is in charge of creating the log entry. So that will shift over to the other file, right? And it's going to create a new record, and it's hard to see because the window is not in the foreground. But anyway, it creates a new record. It sets the fields for level and data, commits the record, and then says, okay, we're done creating the record. Do we have any post processing to do? Looks like there's no one to notify about this, so we just get out of here, and then we say, do we need to close the window or anything? And was it successful? It was successful, and we get out of here, right? And then we have the rest of the scripting. Was there an error? There was no error, so we're in here. You could choose to log some more as you are about to end the script, and be done. So again, if I come in here, I have my new log entry. It says milestone ABC was reached. I know it was from this user by that script. If I want to get more details, I can go and scan anything that's in here to say, oh, I'm curious about, was there any script parameter? Oh, it looks like no, there was none. So there we go, right? So that's one of the use case. Another use case is if you have a script where in your script something, I'm going to say something bad happens, right? Like a FileMaker error where you have get last error with an actual number in there. So over here, I'm having such a script. So if I just keep going and say, okay, well here, I'm really forcing an error because I want my demo to output something with a last error. So I selected go to object with get UUID as the target. So it's impossible for my layout to already have something, a layout object named that way, right? So that is going to it's going to fail. Okay, so I have 116 to say, hey, you said go to object, but the layout object is missing. Okay, so think of it as maybe you have a portal and you want to be deleting records for from the portal. If going to the portal fails and then you keep further into your script and you say, oh, delete records, you're not going to be deleting portal rows. You're going to be deleting parent records, right? So yeah, so we get to the bottom of our script. It says, hey, were we having an error? It looks like yes, we did have an error. So over here we say, okay, we need to log something out, and we're going to say the log level is going to be error, and then we can say, do we need to log this out? It looks like it clears the threshold. And then same thing, we're going to say, let's build our payload. And in this case, I'm saying my payload is going to be made of the log level and the error itself. Now, my error in this case is it's not a string of text. It's a full JSON object, right? So I already have that, and and when we build the payload, if there's anything that I didn't have already in that error object, but that my log default data is asking for, it gets injected in there as well. So, and from there, it's just the same mechanics, right? So it creates the log entry. I'm not going to go through the scripting for that, but we get the one more entry in the log. So now if I come in here, it's going to say, hey, you know what, your script, new script with script error, it had an error. The error was 116, and it happened on line 17, and it was a go-to object that failed, right? And if I want any more details, I can come in here and say, okay, well, what else can I learn about this one specific error? And sometimes maybe having errors that are not going to be something where FileMaker gives you an actual error number for it, right? It's something where maybe you say, oh, I have this information that should be mandatory as a script parameter, and if it's empty, then I want to bail out or something like that. But you'd want to have awareness of that. You'd want to know when is it that a script got called with a wrong set of parameters or something like that. So I have a demo here where we're saying, okay, well, we're going to run a script with what I call a logic error. Okay, so we're simply saying we're initializing our script. We were expecting some JSON from our script parameter, and then we want to say, okay, well, in that we should be having an invoice ID. Okay, and then over here we're saying, well, if invoice ID is empty, we're going to create an error in the same JSON format that we had, for when we had the 116 error, but we're going to use -2 as an error. It's off the existing scope of error codes that FileMaker uses natively, so we can easily distinguish. And I want to say, okay, invoice is missing, and invoice ID is missing. Sorry. So as we get to that, it's the same mechanism. Our scripting is going to detect that an error happened. We're still going to say, okay, well, if an error happened, we want to log it as error level, and then we can come in here and just say, what's my payload, and then send that over to the other file to create the log entry. So, and then we get out and we can go look and say, oh, looks like I ran a script, but it got me error code -2 saying invoice ID is missing. It was run by admin, and any other details, like I said already for all the other examples. So, so yeah, that's the whole thing, trying to wrap everything together, to bring everything together. So if there's anything in here that that you're still having question marks about, now is a good time. Or if not question marks, if it's comments, to say, oh, but well, Robert, have you thought of this, or what about scenario X? Let's just open up on a discussion segment. I see Tony raising his hand.
Yes, thank you. Thought-provoking. Once again. So as prompted, I did drop a link to two things. One, custom function. It's kind of an adjoining topic. I was doing a deep dive on set error logging script step that showed up in
Mhm.
18, and I was highly motivated to do it because I had a script somebody else wrote that was for hippity hops, script calls a script, blah, 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 spread across
Mhm.
2 or 3 files. So I said, hey, this set error logging feature looks good. Hadn't used it before because, I didn't have any errors in the code I wrote. Just kidding.
And it was
So,
brand new.
well, it actually, to be fair, was not my code, which obviously makes it more challenging. But, a true story, I hadn't used the set error logging. Turns out it's a terrific feature. So I really looked at it, stared at it, read about it, read blog posts, watched videos, and I was thinking, well, how would I implement it? And I would encourage anyone to look at it. It's not logging, as Robert indicated, is complex. A lot of different ways to log, a lot of different places to log. Some set error logging, great feature, doesn't work on cloud. So, there's that, but it does work on the desktop, and it was super duper helpful in 2 different use cases in the past couple weeks. And what I
Mhm.
did and posted up on the FileMaker custom function website, Brian Dunning, is what I think is a plausible implementation of a custom function named at custom debug info, named after column 8. If you click the link on the set error logging, you'll see that there's a column 8. And I thought about it, and it's like, well, let me do a JSON object. Don't format it because that would cause line breaks. Because if you do just a JSON object, it'll escape the tabs. FileMaker set error logging, they write to the disk a tab delimited. So
Yes.
it's one line, imports beautifully into BBEdit. If you don't wrap, it imports into FileMaker, and then you can subsequently format and parse whatever kind of JSON object you give. I
Mhm.
shipped it. I'm not 100%, maybe I put too many get functions, maybe not enough. It's a good starting point. Anyone wants to pick it up. And let me just think, closing thoughts. I looked at the format that FileMaker gives us for the set error capture, and I kind of like, they're not going to change their code to match mine. So let me write, let me just live with that.
Mhm.
So my thinking, Robert, would be that I would look, if, I would consider the possibility of writing in a similar format, so I can merge the 2 different kinds of things, the errors and the speed metrics. I forget what you call them. Potentially to have a unified log. And but anyway, interesting, thought-provoking, and that's what I have to say for now. Have at the
Mhm.
custom function. Hope you find it useful.
Yeah, and the one thing that I'm not, just to speak a little bit about the set error logging thing. Um, like we said, right? It makes the output to the user's workstation. So I mean, for your own debugging thing, it can be helpful. But to have awareness of what happens from other people's sessions, it's really difficult to get them to difficult to
You have
retrieve
to
the
read
file,
it
or
in.
retrieve the information. Yeah.
We
So
had already had the code to read
yeah.
the crash logs into our help
Hmm.
ticket system. We have for a long time a help file centralized, and I was like, we had some
Hmm.
crashes, and I'm like, click the button here, and we would.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a similar concept. FileMaker 18 coincidentally gives you all these data file things. So you
Yeah,
do have to kind
absolutely.
of work that process in,
And
but it
yeah,
does work.
and the other thing that I wanted to say about, again, the set error logging is, well, I mean, the name says it, right? It's set error logging, so it's all error driven, and it won't let you log something out unless you have a native FileMaker error code, right? So yeah, those are the things.
You
Um,
you
and
could.
again, like,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah.
No, I
you
was
could
going to
force
say
an error,
you're
right?
no, absolutely right. And yeah, the first time I used it, I told it to go to layout 9,807. I don't have that many
Mhm.
layouts, so that kicked in there. And that was a little bit of a test that it does indeed work. It gives you some things for free. It gives you the line. Let's see, what does it give you for free? It gives you the line number of the step name
Yep.
for free. So you could kind of mix and match a little bit. You got to watch
Mhm.
out for record lock, or not record lock, it file locking, because it writes to the data file. Or let me rephrase that. This script step opens the file for access. In other words, it kind of locks the record, so you have to kind of take that into consideration in your script. And you can close it, but you have to remember to close it because
Mhm.
you don't want to compete for a record lock on the file. The custom, little incentive to look at the custom function I dropped. It's smart enough to give you the layout ID, not just the layout name, which could change. If you have a help
Mhm.
ticket system, I always like get the layout ID and I get the script ID
Yeah.
because those could change. Um, but yeah,
Good. And
you could mix and match maybe and write to two different files with the same structure. Just a thought.
mhm. Awesome.
Anyway, yeah. Well, those are my thoughts. It's early days. There's a lot to do with this mix and match.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that Claris would put something in place that would let people basically write to server logs, right? From the code, and spare everyone having to put together the scaffolding of, oh, I need to create a log table, I need to, have it be in a dedicated file or not a dedicated file, and secure it or whatever. If we were able to just write out to the server logs, I think it
That
would
would be
be
nice. Unified error reporting
nice. Yeah.
across all clients. That'd be nice.
hmm So, all right. So I think I'll stop sharing unless someone wants to dig some more into the insides of the demo files. Once, twice, three times done. All right.
All right. Thank you, Robert, for the presentation. Tony, thanks for the insights on the set error log and your custom function. Definitely will go out and try to use it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a V2.
oh,
It
nice. All
might
right.
have too little, might have too much. Probably has both.
Well, the good thing is it's FileMaker, so we can customize whatever we want, right?
Yeah, and you can parse it because it all goes into if you put it into a FileMaker table single field, it doesn't really matter because it's like if you add or delete, you can just change the parsing script later. So I rolled it out. All right, thanks, Robert,
Cool. Yep.
and
Thanks,
thanks for the show.
Robert.
Thanks for putting on the show.
All right. So for next, normally we skip December because it's, the holidays. Unless there's a specific topic or presentation where we definitely want to have in December, we'll probably go ahead and have our next meetup be January. So if you really want a December meetup, feel free to reach out to me, and if you have a good topic, we'd be happy to figure out a time. But otherwise, generally, I don't think we've had a December meetup in several years.
Right.
So, assuming, does anybody have any other topics, items they'd like to discuss today, or shall we wrap things up?
I just want to quickly mention that email bug that we found this week. We have a couple of clients that have experienced spinning wheel of death when using a script that has a send email script step in it. And it seems to be a Windows 11 update. There's two of the latest Windows updates. I don't have the numbers handy at this moment, but if you want to know the specifics, you can feel free to message me. So there's a couple of those Windows 11 updates that are interfering with the send email script step.
And Raven, that's send email via client, right?
Yeah, via email client. Yeah, so it's interfering with Outlook.
And I think it's also, with Outlook. So it's a specifically Windows FileMaker Outlook problem.
The unholy trinity. Yep.
Tony,
Oh,
you raised your hand?
Yeah, thank you. I got reminded when Raven mentioned bug. This is a bit of a PSA. I'm dropping some more links here. Hopefully this is all good. All right, so FileMaker different venues, there's community, there's FM soup, there's FM experts list, and there's a popular Slack group out there somewhere. The somebody, I was doing a deep dive, I started a deep dive on custom menus, and then I came across somebody on FM experts, free to join, not complaining, reporting an issue with custom menus. And I was like, darn, I wanted to use those more and more. And then coincidentally, the LA group, FM Disc, there was a presentation at the most recent one a couple weeks ago. It's posted by Barbara Levine, where and I dropped a link to that so you can watch it. And she reported an issue with custom menus, and she had a solution. Full disclosure, her solution seemed to be at variance with what I'm seeing, so there may be multiple issues out there. And then just piling on here, somebody posted to a popular Slack group that they were having a issue, and then someone else added, oh, us too.